Before Meridian was a city, it was a crossroads, where tracks built a town and connected the South. But these tracks carried more than freight. They carried stories of persistence, resilience, healing, and sorrow. In the early 1850s, Richard McLemore, Meridian's first settler, gave land to newcomers hoping to build a community. Lewis Ragsdale and John T. Ball bought acreage anticipating the Mobile and Ohio Railroad's arrival. In 1855, a contract was signed to lay tracks through their land, and Meridian was born. Ball and Ragsdale often feuded over the town's name. Ragsdale wanted Sawashi, while Ball preferred Meridian. The railroad settled it. When the company requested a charter from the state legislature, the name on the paperwork was Meridian. In 1864, General Sherman targeted Meridian's rail hub, tearing up over 100 miles of track. He aimed to make the city useless for military purposes. Depots, machine shops, and warehouses were destroyed. But within 29 days, the railroads were rebuilt, a testament to the resilience of the community. The speed of that rebuild was staggering. It wasn't just engineering, it was desperation. The Confederacy needed those lines, and they used every resource available to make it happen. In 1883, Meridian became the stage for the Great Train Race. Two rail lines, the Queen and Crescent and the Louisville and Nashville, competed for a U.S. mail contract. The Queen and Crescent, stopping in Meridian for 4 minutes to change engines, won, arriving in New Orleans 8 hours ahead of its rival. Then came nature's fury. On March 2, 1906, a tornado tore through downtown, destroying 5 blocks and damaging key rail infrastructure. The New Orleans and Northeastern Freight Depot was destroyed, power was knocked out, and 23 lives were lost. The tornado didn't just flatten buildings, it disrupted everything: rail traffic, commerce, and communication. But what stands out is how quickly Meridian got back on its feet. Within months, businesses reopened and the station was running again, because that's what Meridian does. It rebuilds. It's the spirit of community and love that keeps us going, and our resilience can not only be found on a broad scale, but also on a personal level.
So when Jimmie Rodgers was a little boy, Meridian was booming. It was an absolutely booming railroad town. You know, Weidman's was open 24 hours a day. The medicine shows would come through. So he learned music from the Scottish and Irish folk musicians. The Alpine yodelers had come through in the mid-1800s, and the African-American musicians had kept that yodel going. And so when Jimmie was 13, he'd run away a couple of times with the medicine show. And by that, I mean, he'd hop on a train and hobo. And he'd gotten stuck a couple of times in, the last time was in Tuscaloosa, or near Tuscaloosa. It's actually West Blockton. And we have a letter where he wrote his Aunt Dora and said, "I quit the show, the man wouldn't treat me right." So his dad at this point gave him a choice and said, either you go back to school or you get a job working on the train with me. His dad was a railroad foreman. And so, of course, as any, 13, 14-year-old boy would do, he chose to go back to work go to work with his dad on the train. And he was the little water boy for the Gandy dancers. And even one of his songs, Mule Skinner Blues, talks about, "Hey, little water boy, turn that water truck around." And so that's what he was doing. He was toting the water for the Gandy dancers, and that's where he learned the blues. So he learned those songs, it was really a predecessor to the blues. So he got the folk music from in town, and then when his daddy made him get a job working with him on the train, he learned the blues, and he blended it all into that one sound. We know him as the father of country music, but more broadly, he's the father of America's music.
So I first learned about Susie Glover about 2002 when we were doing an exhibit over at the Railroad Museum. And someone came in and said, "You need to feature Susie Glover." And I was like, "Well, who is Susie Glover?" And they said, "Oh, you don't know Susie Glover? She is the famous train caller from Meridian." She became famous throughout the United States as one of the most melodic train callers to ever call trains in the U.S. She was an African-American woman. She went to work for the railroad as a housekeeper, and then she started actually carrying baggage and all for train customers. And she also did the parcels for the parcel post. She did a lot of things. She worked in the depot cafe. And one day, the train master could not be found to call the trains, and so she started calling the trains, and they said, you know what, Susie, you have a new job. This is your job. And she sang in what I would call a spiritual, colored spiritual method, where everything was just melodic. It sounded, people would come and actually watch and come to the Meridian to actually hear her do her train call. By the 1940s, it was all automated at all the other stations, and Meridian still had a live train caller.
Shadow, you know, that is my favorite story. I'm so happy that you've brought him up. He was a pet that the crew found when they came to work on the railroad, probably the GM&O. He had been stuffed behind a rail car. Someone was trying to get rid of that puppy, and they heard him whine. And they looked at each other and they thought, what are we going to do with this little half-starved dog? Because see, it was during the Depression. They barely had enough food in their lunch pails to feed themselves, much less a little dog. But they all came together and decided if they could give one spoonful to that puppy every day, each one of them, he could live. And he did. And he thrived for 12 years. He lived here on the tracks. Every morning when the crew came in early, he was there. He could hear trains coming from miles away, because this is before computerized schedules were available. And so he was their schedule. He could sniff out other varmints, and he'd growl and bark, and they would leave, whatever they happened to be, probably another dog. He could sniff out leaks in the tracks. So he lived here on the tracks, right outside the door here, for 12 years.
Deeply embedded in these stories and the roots of Meridian are continual persistence, resilience, healing, and sorrow. Local businessman, philanthropist, and preservationist, Mr. Jim McCray, and current mayor of Meridian, Mr. Percy Bland, are two well-known figures in Meridian who were keenly aware of the railroad's importance, not only to our city's foundation, but also its future.
The railroads are the most important thing we've got. Approximately in the 1500s, they discovered that the steel wheel that rolled on the steel rail is so much more economical than using trucks or wagons or anything else that was available in those days and available now. Still the same. Clearspan Components, for instance, a company that I own the west side of town, we prefab building parts and ship them out to large contractors who build large apartment buildings and churches and other things. But anyway, most of the lumber that we use comes from the West Coast. That lumber is straighter and better than our southern pine lumber, but it'd be impractical to buy it from the West Coast and try to truck it that far. So we use the railroads for that. And that makes Clearspan. And just like Soule made the railroads possible, we all have to work together as a unit. And if it had not been for the Soule and our places like this, the railroads probably couldn't have existed.
As mayor, I am proud of Meridian's deep railroad heritage and the impact it made not only on our city, but on the entire South. For decades in the late 19th century, Meridian served as one of the region's major rail hubs. Those rails carried in many of the founding families who shaped our identity, including the Dreyfus family, who built our iconic 3-foot building, and the Wideman family, whose restaurant Wideman's remains a Mississippi treasure. Meridian's story has not been without hardship, but we have always responded with resilience. When our city faced physical destruction, we rebuilt. When economic challenges came, we persisted. When our population declined, we recovered and continued to grow. Today, the railroad still plays a vital role in our progress. Through our Amtrak partnership, it connects our residents and visitors alike. Through freight and commerce, it continues to support local industry and infrastructure. Even our 10-stop Civil War trail reminds travelers of the strategic role Meridian once played and brings tourism into our community. The railroad is the backbone of our past and a foundation for our future. With every step of revitalization in our downtown and every investment in our city's growth, we are moving forward with the same strength, determination, and momentum that first put Meridian on the map.
Without the railroad, we would not have Soule here or much of the industry that we have here. Meridian would just be a sleepy little town in Mississippi.
Right here where we're sitting today is where those tracks came through, 1854. And that started the city of Meridian. Meridian was formed on the backs of the rails.
But railroads can only be on the continent. They'll always be here. And we hope that Cliffman and companies like them, and hopefully Soule, will be here forever.